Tanner Olson, and this is the Walk a Little Slower podcast. Here, we talk about hope and heaviness, joy and sorrow, life and God, questions and answers, and everything in between. This is a podcast where you are invited to slow down, to lean in, to hold fast, and to eventually keep going. Welcome. Welcome back to another episode of the Walk a Little Slower podcast. If you haven't yet subscribed or rated and reviewed the podcast, make sure to do so. It only takes a minute and it means a lot. Well, I'm thrilled to share this particular episode with you. On this week's podcast, I'm joined by Sean Dietrich. Sean Dietrich, also nicknamed Sean of the South, he's an American writer of books and newspaper columns. He focuses on the South and its people. Sean is also a musician, a speaker, a podcaster, and a blogger. And Sean is also my friend. I'm thrilled to introduce you to him this week. And I'll tell you right now, we had a little difficulty recording, but with a little editing, we were able to make it work. So if you're wondering, hey, that sounds a little bit off, well, that's just because we had some problems. But it's a great episode, a great conversation. Sean drops some wonderful wisdom, and I gotta be honest, I loved it. So anyways, here is my conversation with Sean Dietrich. I am a planner, maybe to my detriment, which is kind of how it goes sometimes.
Well, that's good. No, that's good. Sometimes I wish I were. I'm a seat of the pantser.
Everything? Even with writing?
Oh, everything, yeah. Just about.
See, I tend to plan everything out. Like I have my calendar, and most of my days are like, I'm doing this, and this today, and I want to write about this. But you are just like, this is kind of...
It's the muse. It's for me. It's all. If I have a plan, I'll deviate from the plan, and then I have no idea where I am. But if I don't have a plan, then everything is ordained.
Yeah,
it's all supposed to be. But if I have a plan, I will deviate from it anyway. So all I do is waste however many hours it takes to plan. That's with everything, for me.
So when it comes to writing, are you inspiration hits and you go? Or?
No, I mean, you can't, because I do it every day. I write in kind of the newspaper column style, and you don't get the luxury of waiting for inspiration. It's just kind of it's a daily exercise, I guess all writers know, but it's a daily exercise, and sometimes you feel particularly inspired, but other times you have to just hammer through and find the thread of what you're, or what I'm looking for, inspirational wise or whatever.
Yeah. So oftentimes I get asked, and I know that you get asked this question a lot too, is where do you find your inspiration? How do you answer that question? Because when people ask me that, I'm like, I am always looking for it. I'm not necessarily sure. I'm just looking at all the time.
For me, inspiration is not something I even look for. Or ideas that I write about aren't things that I look for. They just kind of happen. They happen to me, and the things that stick out the most memorable things, for me, it's almost like this is what you need to write about. It's not. It's almost like it's kind of without getting hooky spooky. It's almost like it's given to you. It's like this is it. There's no question. This is what. Today is about, and other times it's a little more obscure, and other times during those obscure times it's even more surprising, because once you turn on the faucet and start to write, all of a sudden it comes. In the newspaper business, they call it the Daily Miracle, and it's named that for a reason. It's just it's like it happens, every day.
Yeah. It's like, what am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? Oh, that's what I'm going to write about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's start from the beginning, because people are probably listening and they're like, who is this guy? So when you're at a party, I don't know if you party, I don't really party, but and someone asks, what do you do? How do you respond? What do you tell them?
I say, about what? Because that question has always been a particularly gross question to me, because I've always found myself doing things that I'm not necessarily, that don't necessarily rank in terms of braggadocious brownie points. So I've always felt really insecure when people ask, what do you do? And I always feel ridiculous because, I remember going to one cocktail party in a really, really nice house, and people asked, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I laid the tile in this house, actually. And they looked around and they were like, could you get us a refill on our drink? It's interesting to me. I found that men ask, what do you do, to each other? And women often ask, so where are you from? So, and these two fundamental questions, I think, are just so incredibly different at their heart and soul. What do you do? We men are a lot of times men, and I'm included in this. I find myself asking people this question, like, what do you do? And that's so that I can define you by your job, your occupation. Women, where are you from? They want to know who your people are. They want to know who your folks are. And I think that is just wonderful to.
Yeah.
So anyway, what do I do? I'm a writer, and I am I don't really know. I speak, I do that for a living too. I play music. I've played music for a long time, and I wouldn't consider myself good at any of these particular subjects, but I enjoy all three, all five, or however many I do. So.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you said about men and women, because those are like those like the two go-to questions, and then after that, then you get to the weather. So it's like what do you do? Where are you from? And then it's like, all right, we've ran out of things. How's the weather? But you and I have something in common. We're both from the South, and for a lot of your life, you've called Florida home. I'm from Central Florida. I grew up in a town called Oviedo, which is just right outside of Orlando. And you're from the Panhandle, correct? Or that's where you've called home for a long time?
Yeah, the Panhandle I've been there since I was a child, so that's home. And it's kind of, once it works its way into your blood, you obviously know it's really hard to get that salt water out of your system.
Yeah, it's funny too when I tell people that I'm from Florida. That's when they want to put you into another category as well. And saying that you're from Florida is a wonderful excuse. I've used this so many times. Like if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm coming off kind of like not intelligent, which happens more often than you might think, or if I don't know the answer to something, I'll just eventually say, well, I'm from Florida. And they seem to be like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like, of course, you're from Florida.
Florida is a weird state because it's all the states. It's I always say the further north you get, the further south you're going, and the further south you go, you're getting into Cuba. So you're right. You're totally right. That's I'm gonna have to steal that, use that in a conversation. Well, I'm from Florida.
I'm from Florida, and it's gonna work. It's gonna work perfectly. People will be like, "Well, you make a lot of sense now." Like, oh, there he is. Yeah, it was for me, it was a wonderful place to grow up because I felt like I was living in all kinds of worlds, and it was always sunny too, which was exactly what I needed. So I was introduced to your work while I was on a podcast titled "This Undivided Life" with Troy McLaughlin, and he was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of Sean Dietrich?" And I was like, "No, I hadn't." But so while I'm on the podcast with him, I just start typing on my computer and trying to look as like focused and as stoic as possible. And Troy, if you're listening, I promise I was listening to you, but I was also very curious about who Sean was, and I saw that you had written a memoir titled "Will the Circle Be Unbroken?" A memoir of learning to believe you're going to be okay. And while I'm on the podcast, I'm on Amazon and I click order by, like the buy with one click. And I did that without even thinking twice because I'm in the process of writing a memoir myself and I needed some encouragement. And I figured that I would find it in your book. Spoiler alert, I found it in your book. Sean, it's a beautiful and heartbreaking and hopeful story, and it's your story. So what was, and this is a very big question, I have like 400 questions about the book, but I'm only going to ask one and we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
But for you, what was it like writing that book?
It was actually a lot of fun. It was the whole process was just a blast. And it's, it's not a particularly savory subject matter, so that sounds a little bit, maybe even a little bit irreverent, but I had been writing my blog and it had turned into a newspaper column, so it wasn't coming to newspapers, and I was doing this every day, and it was a spiritual practice is what it really turned into. Writing every day was a purging, especially when it came to the topic of my father and all of that I covered in the book, so that by the time I got to the book, it was like playing your scales on a guitar or on the piano for a lot of years, and all of a sudden it's time to play, and you realize, oh my gosh, my fingers, I'm not thinking about it, they're just moving, they're doing what I need. And that's how it was writing the book. I had through the grace of God worked through a lot of the infection that was inside me writing the columns and the blogs, so that the pus was vanquished. And so now I can look at my own life from maybe a third person angle, which is really fascinating, and it depersonalizes everything you went through, and it gives you another perspective on who you are and what you have gone through. And so I enjoyed it the whole way through. I told my editor when we started it, I said, I want to write this book about my life. It's not a great topic, but I want it to be funny. I want it to be entertaining. I want it to be honest, and I want it to be who I am, as a person. And she said, well, good luck, because that's really hard to do. And I guess it is, but that book wrote itself for me, and it was a lot of fun. And I look back on the process of writing it with a lot of fondness. So.
It's a very therapeutic process, and that's one of the first things. Like, I don't want to brag, but I've been to counseling twice. I've had 2 different appointments. The first time it cost $100. The second time it was a lot more than that. I'm thinking about going back for a third time. But every time I've gone, what they tell you is to, write things down, is to write, about your story or your journal some thoughts and stuff. And it's such a therapeutic process. And one of the things I loved about the book, because it was all the things that you mentioned. It was funny, it was insightful, and it was you. I felt like I knew you after I read the book. And I'm sure a lot of people come up to you and say something similar, where it's like, Sean, I feel like I know you. And you're like, and what's your name?
They do know me. And that's one of the marvelous things about what I've been fortunate enough to do through the writing is, I've laid it all out there, and there's really not anything left to, so, when people say we know you, they probably know more about me than I do.
Yeah.
So
you really do.
But what you just said is so true. It is therapeutic. I've been in therapy for, golly, I don't know how many years. I have a good friend who's a therapist, and I've worked through so many things and need to work through more, and it's been so good for me. And actually, he was this therapist friend of mine. He's one of the major catalysts, to move me into writing, was to encourage me to get it down, write it down.
Yeah, there's something about it. Like, I know for myself, after I write, and it can be about really anything. It doesn't even have to be about myself. It can just be about, questions that the world is wrestling with, or just like a little poem. But I feel lighter. Like, the sun shines a little bit brighter. It's one of those things where it's like, people will talk about, you got to get outside every day. You got to eat vegetables, or, do all those things. But also for me, it's like, I also think we should spend some time, like, just writing, just putting some words down on the paper. It changes everything.
Yeah. I totally agree. My day is not complete. It's become such a staple of my day and every experience I have, that I haven't truly processed what I'm going through, good or bad, until I've written about it, period. If my wife and I took a vacation to Hawaii, now at this, wherever I am now in this mind space, I would have to write about Hawaii before I could really enjoy it. I would have to, so we go and do something, maybe, I've never been to Hawaii, but if we ever go to Hawaii and do this or do that, I'd have to go back to the hotel, and the next morning I would have to talk about it in my, writing voice, to really feel it and see it and experience it. I'm not sure why that is about me now, but that's how.
No, I think I resonate with that a lot too. There's a quote, and I think it's by Flannery O'Connor. Maybe it's not. I think it could be, but I think she says, like, I don't know what I feel or think until I write about it.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
That's good.
And like, as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, that's me. Like, I kind of have to write through what I'm going through to kind of understand what it is I'm going through. Like, it takes me a long time. Like, if somebody asks, how do you feel, or how are you doing? I don't know. Like, give me like 20 minutes. Let me write about it, and then I'll come back to you with a really good answer. But in the moment, I'm like, oh, it's a gamble. I'm not really sure.
That is so true.
Yeah. One of the things I really enjoyed about the memoir and a lot of your writing, first of all, I feel like we have a lot of similarities in our writing, because a lot of the things that you write, it always comes back to the idea and the belief that everything is going to be all right, that everything is going to be okay. And that's like a huge theme throughout the memoir, and then also like in your daily writings as well, and all the people that you get to meet and all the places that you get to go, like everything is going to be all right. When you write about that, are you mostly writing to yourself too?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely, because so much of my life I've gone through where I did not believe it was going to be okay. Nothing was going to be okay. It's going to be worse than anything you've ever imagined. That's the kind of belief, and yet 90% of the things I worry about never happen, and even the ones that do happen, you come through it and it changes you in a better way. These things sound so cliche and so trite, what I'm saying, but it's the human experience. That's why it's a cliche. So you go through these horrible times, and we've just gone through a few really particularly horrible times within the last year, I'd say. And there was even a point last year, I thought I'm not. The doctors were telling me something really bad, and I thought for sure I wasn't going to be here this year. Actually, I thought I'd be dead, and it's okay. I've come through it, and now the doctors can't find nothing, and everything's okay. Everything's great. That's not everybody's experience, I understand, but there is this piece of human nature that just immediately goes to the worst, and I don't believe that it's. I don't believe that's a fact. I don't believe even the worst. I don't even believe the worst is the worst, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Sometimes I think about it like, because like you said, we all go through different things, the human experience, and it doesn't always work out the way it works out for others as it does for ourselves. But sometimes I just like sit back and I think, well, maybe God has just given me something new to write about.
Yeah.
And maybe that's correct, or maybe that's just me trying to cheer myself up about it and get back to work. But I think as people who are writers, as we approach each day like ready to write about stuff, like that's just, for me, it's an easy way to kind of look at it, like, well, maybe God's just giving me something new to write about. And if that's true,
maybe for me, it's definitely given me some sort of, when you go through anything cruddy, I feel like it gives you a little bit of a superpower all of a sudden. You have this extraordinarily heightened sense of empathy that doesn't go away if you don't want it to go away. If you want, if you want to get jaded again and go, forget about what you've been through, you can. But if you want to hold on to that and you let it make you a raw nerve so that you can understand people and approach people in a much more sensitive way, you can hold on to that. And I'm at bad moments. I'm trying to let them really, tenderize me, make me more empathetic.
Have you seen that like in yourself, like because of writing, and even the things that you've gone through, but more so like the combination of the two, of the things that you've gone through, and then writing about the things that you've gone through? Have you seen that it's made you like a more vulnerable, empathetic human being?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've written about a lot of people who've gone through some really bad things. I've written about a bunch of children with cancer, some living, some dead. A lot of people who've gone through really traumatic experiences. I've written about a lot of people, so I've gotten to meet a lot of people, and the unifying theme that always comes through these, when we talk to them, is that A, it's all going to be okay, and B, we're all in this together, so let's help each other. And this is powerful. This is powerful for me because you go through bad stuff. At any point in your life, the tendency is to feel completely alone and isolated. It's just I think it's a human instinct to kind of go off into the corner and lick your sore paw and say, I'm alone here. No one else can understand what I'm feeling. When you put yourself out into like some sort of public forum with your writing, other people who say, well, I've been through that, and I've been through that, and I've been through that. And then when they come in mass numbers and they're describing what you've been through and you're describing what they've been through, and everybody's just intermingling their experiences and to where it all sounds like one, very similar experience, you start to think there's a reason for all this. This suffering brings us closer to something really powerful. This suffering brings us close to, I don't know, something good.
Yeah, and it's such a fun. Being a writer is not like an easy thing. Like, I don't want people to like listen to this and be like, well, I should just be like, it's a lot to like look inside and then try to find where a comma goes and then put it out into the world and be like, here's what we have to offer, like to wrestle with all of the bad and then to look for the light in the darkness and then try to offer that and then to do that again the next day and the next day and the next day. But by doing that, like you said, I think it does help other people see. One of the best compliments I think that a writer can get, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is like, you put into words what I'm feeling, or you put into words kind of what I was going through to kind of help with that, help with the processing, or help with taking a step from today to tomorrow, or this minute to the next minute. I don't know. I'm just
I agree. I mean, I don't get that much, but I mean, that is a big compliment. If I were to get it, I know that what writing has done for me, especially on that subject matter, is it has made me feel connected to this enormous club. The first speaking event I did for a kind of a bigger group was. I was so nervous. I'd never done any of that before. And just didn't know what I was doing. And at the end, people came up to greet, the meet and greet kind of thing, sign your book. And almost, I would say at least 70% of the line had gone through serious trauma. Some of them just make you scratch your head at how you still here. And I would say the other 30% of the line were suicide survivors. So I had gone through a big part of my life not meeting many suicide survivors at all. And in one night, I was meeting a lot of them. And so then the further I got into this writing journey, the more and more I was meeting, and the more traumatic people who've gone through trauma of any kind, it all of a sudden changes your perspective. You think, oh my gosh, not only, if you're lucky enough to be able to put into words what other people are feeling, that's awesome. But the flip side of that is you are able to see with your own eyes what other people like you are going through. Mm-hmm. It's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you get to do, and you do it so well, is you continue to show up and you continue to be available to people, and you continue, like, you meet people pretty much with open hands. Like, this is what I know, this is what I've gone through. And then I think in turn, like, that invites them to do the same thing with the people in their lives. And so maybe you may not hear the compliment like you put into words how I'm feeling, but what you do for them is you give them you give them hope, and you give them this example of, like, yeah, you can go through hard things, and we can go through them together, like you were saying.
Well, I want to give a lot of people validation. I want them to feel, what I'm feeling is this is okay to feel this, and what I'm going through, this is all okay. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, a podcast is just two people talking over each other. Anyways, this is great. But I do want to talk a little bit about your writing journey, and because I know you didn't like set out to be a writer, you just kind of stumbled upon it.
Yes.
So kind of like, walk me through, like, how did Sean of the South, which by the way is a fantastic name, like, how did Sean of the South kind of start? When was this for you? And just walk me through the early years, because I think a lot of people listening are like, I want to be a writer too, or I'm just kind of interested in, like, I'm personally interested in the background of how people got started. So what was that like for you, Sean?
Okay. I would say, first of all, if anybody is listening and wanted to be a writer, then you already are. Because if you want to be it, that means that desire is there. People who aren't writers don't have that desire. So that might free somebody up, because it sure freed me up when I was younger. I remember I met an older guy, and he said, "You want to know how you know if you're a writer?" And I said, "How?" He said, "Are you writing?" I said, well, yeah. He said, well, then you're a writer. He said, writers write. That's it. Sounds so easy, but it's so true, because you'll meet a lot of people and they'll say, well, I always thought I could be a writer, but they're not writing. Mm-hmm. But you meet people and they'll say, well, I've always wanted to be a writer, and they're writing. Well, it's easy. You're right. So, but anyway, how it started for me was, I graduated from college as a grown man, because I dropped out when I was a kid in school. I dropped out in 7th grade. And so after I dropped out of school, after my dad killed himself, I went to work. I started working. And work was actually a really good experience to get into the workforce early. You learn a lot more than you do at school. Not necessarily the same kinds of things, but you are every day learning big time, because you have to, or else you won't last. You won't have a job. So, at school, you can kind of slack off. So I was learning every day, and I was meeting all these people and doing all this stuff, but I wasn't being educated in a school system. So I felt really, really inadequate. In order to placate that inadequate feeling that I had, to satisfy it, I would go to the library a lot, every day sometimes, but definitely a few times a week. And I would check out books, and I'd read them, and I'd bring them back, and I'd check out, and I read like a fool. Not out of a good place, not because I'm some smart guy. I read because I felt so stupid that I was trying to overcompensate for it. So, some of it was good, some of it was just some minor obsession in order to compensate. So anyway, but I'm really grateful that I did read like that, because I picked up a lot of just common sense that inevitably helped me get into college without having my GED. So that was a kind of a minor miracle, but I got into college. I went to community college. It took me 11 years. And when I got through, I had, all college is reading and writing. That's all you do. You read and you write. And you write. And you write for people who never read it. But it's great practice. And you learn how to talk about things that nobody cares about and you don't care about, and you learn how to produce 500 words about it. I love college. And so when I was done, I decided to write some stuff just for my own benefit. I did. And eventually they started to get published in little places. And then I decided I wanted to maybe go pursue journalism, like in a newspaper setting. I was turned down repeatedly for things like that. So that didn't work. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to school and get a degree to allow me to teach writing. So I signed up at FSU, which is not the college of my first choice, but it was close enough and it was in state. I signed up for a course, for like a program, to become a writing teacher. And since I was in my 30s, I was a shoe-in. What are they going to do? Turn you down? So I went and I rented an apartment. I put down all the money I had on this little apartment, and my wife and I were just going to have to commute back and forth about an hour so that I could go to school. So the day that I'm interviewing for this writing program, I go in there, and it's all these people in big black turtlenecks with black horn-rimmed glasses. And I get in there, and they're looking over my stuff, and they look at me and they say, we can't let you into this school. And I looked at them, and I felt naked.
Yeah.
And they said, your educational life is a disaster. We have no place for you here. Frankly, we're shocked that you even applied. And I said, well, I just paid for an apartment. I mean, I've got the lease. I can't get out. I said, we're sorry. You can't. So I was not allowed into FSU. Wow. I went home and just died. I will never be a writer. I will never be anything. I was just this curse, this bad decision that I made a long time ago will stick with me forever. So it was that night that I started writing the first Sean of the South blog. And I wrote a blog that was based, I can't remember exactly. It was based on what I'd just gone through. And anyway, over time, this became the only winning horse I'd ever ridden. From the moment I first started doing it, people responded to me. People were interested. So one Christmas, I had a bunch of these little blog collections that I had done. I decided I was going to print up 150 books and send them out to the people who had been reading my stuff as a thank you for Christmas. And so I put it online. I said, look, I've printed up 150 books. This is my thank you to you for even caring about anything I've ever done. That you give me a reason to write. I work all day and then I come home and I write this, and it's fun, and you're the reason. So here, I got these books. I put it out there online. And within 5 minutes, they were all spoken for. Now, they were all free, so that's... And then my wife's phone started dinging, going ding, 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 and she looked at it, and she's saying, and this is about a decade ago, she's saying, something is going on with my eBay. And I said, your eBay? That's weird. And she went, and somehow her PayPal was connected to her eBay, and someone had found her PayPal address and her eBay, whatever, and every single person who got in the book had paid way above and beyond for the book. So I had all this money all of a sudden in these books. So what do you do with that? I printed up more books. I spent it all to print up more books, and I gave all those books away too. And we did that a bunch of times. And so I think that Christmas we ended up giving away like 500 books, and it was so much fun. It changed my life. It changed my life. And ever since then, we've never stopped. So
that's awesome. I don't know what to say. I just think that's really cool. And I think it's fascinating when you talk to people who kind of get into what they're doing. The thing that, like I always say, people like, I do a lot of stuff with churches, and people will talk about like callings, like God called me to do this, and that's a whole thing we can talk about. But I feel like writing is something that God has invited me to do, and there's this like weird, like, how do you get started doing that? Like, just because you've been like invited to it, or that's what you're created to do, like you still gotta find your footing. But like, you kind of keep falling forward, trusting this is the right thing. But I don't know, you go about it with like, I'm gonna make mistakes, but I'm gonna give stuff away, and I'm gonna try to be humble about it. But I think the big thing is like, and this is what I talk to like a lot of younger writers about, is like, you might have to work 2 jobs so you can do the one thing that you really want to do.
Yeah, and my personal belief is that will make you a better writer. The ones that I like, the people I like to read, and there were people who have actually been out in the world doing real normal stuff. It's the people who sit in the crystal palace of academia that, to me, they're disconnected from reality. They're saying things that their textbooks and professors once said, told them to say, or they're talking a little more higher minded. Whereas someone who has been out there and worked a normal job at a McDonald's or dug a ditch, you're more grounded and you're more familiar with the real normal world than a lot of people will allow themselves to be in certain jobs and situations. So you have something really valuable to say. Yeah.
Well, I think the not being a full-time writer will make you a better writer, at least at the beginning. And I think that's
for me, for sure. I mean, if I don't even now, so now I don't know what we do everything. So, but the one thing remains true for me and always has. If I'm not getting out into the real world, doing something normal and real, I will have nothing to write about. Mm-hmm. And being a writer is an extraordinarily isolating lifestyle. It can be. So it's important to get out there and do stuff. So if you have a job and it requires you to do other things, you've already got an advantage that you don't know you have. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just recently, and I'm sitting in my office, and this is where I spend most of the time, especially during the pandemic. This is really where I was, and talk about that was just 10 months of writer's block. But it was rough. But and I kind of fell into the rhythm of I wake up and then I come in here and I do all the things that I need to do for work or whatever. And part of that is writing. But then I had nothing to write about, and so now I've been going to a coffee shop first thing in the morning. I go there. There's a lot of sunlight. I write. I talk to the people around me. I'm the annoying person who will say hello, right? But I'm with and around people, and I'm hearing people talk about things, and I'm seeing people, and that helps me feel like I'm still part of the world and not just locked away in my office, in my comfortable office.
Yeah, I think isolation is the death of any good content for me. If you're stuck, it's hard. It's hard. Pandemic, I kept the column going to the pandemic, and it was the whole world changed on me. Where I was getting my stuff was coming in through emails. People were emailing me stories and stuff, and everything changed for me during the pandemic. But after the pandemic kind of quelled, it was okay, back to here I am, back among the human race again, writing about normal things. So.
When you're talking to people, are they kind of like face to face? Are they ever a little kind of suspicious? Oh, am I gonna be tomorrow's column? Am I gonna be is he gonna write about me tomorrow?
A lot of people get that way, and sometimes they do, and so I'm real quiet about it. And other times, I'll go after a story. And a couple minutes into it, I realized, nope, this isn't the one that I'm going to tell. This is, and then the real, okay, I'm going to meet some lady who's going to do something really terrible out at a coffee shop. I go to the coffee shop and I go to meet her, and she tells me. And a few minutes into it, I realized, no, this isn't the story for various reasons. And the story is
I lost you again. Wait, go back.
Oh, man.
Go back. So, and the story is?
Yeah, the story is the coffee barista who has 2 cochlear implants, and she's dealing with a rowdy, customer, and she's so gracious and kind. And I'm watching this while this other lady's talking to me, and I'm thinking, wow, look at this. I mean, wow, what a exceptional human she is. I mean, to take this abuse and to be so kind, and it's kind of amazing for me where the story really happens.
Now, one of the things that really frustrates me about you is you are able to write every single day. You put out a column, you put out a blog post, something new every single day. It is. I mean, it is so frustrating to watch as a fellow writer. I'm like watching this and I'm like, man, this guy is so much better than me. Now I've worked through a lot of like insecurity to where I can say it as a joke and it not be a real thing. But like, I think it's, first of all, I think it's admirable. And I love that you have the ability to do that. Is that like, how long have you been doing, like, when was the last time you missed a day? Do you know that?
I haven't missed a day. Well, let's see. Well, there's two ways I can answer that. Like, I haven't missed a day publishing in 10 years.
Okay.
But writing, I write every day. So the last time I wasn't able to write every day was probably a year ago. I went through with my mother-in-law was passing.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some days in there where I wasn't able to write, but I had already written something for that following day. But no, most of, I would say 99% of the year I write every day. Here's the cool thing about that. And I'm flattered that you think it's admirable and all that. But really it's just a compulsion, and that's not a good thing probably. But the second thing I would say is, the beauty of writing every day is that I'll back up. I watched a documentary on baseball, Ken Burns' Baseball. That's one of my favorite documentaries ever. And there's a reporter who is a young reporter, and he is interviewing Casey Stengel, this old, grizzled New York Mets baseball manager. And they're in the dugout, and it's during the national anthem. And all the baseball players exit the dugout, and they stand on the field, they put their hand over their heart, they sing the national anthem. Meanwhile, this young reporter is still talking to Casey Stengel through the national anthem, and he's still doing the interview. And then the national anthem's over, and the reporter goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I talked with you all the way through the national anthem." And Casey Stengel goes, "Kid, we do this every day." And the idea hit me. There is something liberating about doing it every day. You miss it one day, and it's not, it's stale, and what you wrote wasn't really what you were hoping to write. You got tomorrow, and tomorrow wasn't so good. That's all right. You're going to do it again the next day. And it's actually a lot more free.
Yeah.
And that sounds oxymoronic or almost counterintuitive, but it's actually freeing. The more you do it, the less you're embarrassed by the result.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because Mondays was bad doesn't mean that Tuesdays is going to be bad.
Right. And as a matter of fact, you learn to embrace that. You learn to embrace the ebb and the flow. And just because it doesn't score well in your mind at, that day, 10 years from now, somebody sent me a post, that I had written about 8 years ago, and I didn't know it was me. They didn't say it was me, and I'm reading through it, and I'm reading this experience, and I'm going, "Oh, this is really well written. I like this," which is something I have never ever said about my own work. I have never felt that about my own work. Mm-hmm. I'm reading this, going, "This is good," and by the end, I realized, "Oh my gosh, I wrote this." And I remember writing this and thinking, "This sucks," and I'm reading it. And I'm thinking, not bad. And I'm looking at myself 8 years ago going, "Not bad, Sean, not bad." And I gave my 8 years, my junior, that imaginary self, a pat on the back. You did okay, buddy. Mm-hmm. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I have written some things where, and they just weren't good. Like early in my writing career, I started out writing like spoken word poetry, and all of it is like, it's super angsty, and it is just like very like there's emotional, and then there was the stuff that I was writing, and it just like wasn't good. But I always say, like, if you're willing to be bad at something, you might just become good at it. And that's where I was. Like, I was very willing to be bad at it, and but I still released it, put it out into the world, and it's still floating around in some places, and people will find it and they'll be like, "This is really good." And then I question all of their choices, but it is like, even the bad stuff, like the stuff that maybe you don't connect with that you wrote, or the stuff that you think is good, other people need to hear it.
I've been humbled so many times where I will write something and go, this is the worst drivel that has ever come out of my mouth. And then it will be like that night before I go to bed, I'll get an email, and it'll be somebody who will say something to the tune of, I was in the bathroom and I was going to kill myself, and I got your thing, and I didn't do it. And of course then I'm weeping and crying, and I'm thinking, and this is another cliche, that's another trite little phrase I'm going to say, but you're supposed to get out of the way when you write anyway. Mm-hmm. And if you do that the way that it's supposed to be done, then it's really not even all the time you who's doing the talking, if you get my drift. And every now and then, God will talk through an ass. And he's done it a bunch when I've been behaving like one. So, anyway, that's kind of an interesting.
Well, I made a career out of it, so. But I think that is it's every day that I get to do this, I am just extremely thankful that people will listen and will read and will respond and will engage with the things that I'm wrestling with, because they've sent stories or opened up to me. And every time I get like a message on Instagram or an email from someone who said like, hey, this is what your work means to me, I no longer question, at least for a moment, am I supposed to be doing this? Like I know in that I'm supposed to keep being the person who tends to overshare or however you want to say it. But
there's so few who are saying the things that you're saying, and people need that in this social media culture. The social media culture goes totally against it. I mean, you're supposed to put makeup on and make yourself look beautiful for every photograph. You're not supposed to share the real you. You're supposed to share the contrived you. And every now and then you come across someone who's really telling their heart. And I don't know, that I think it's more valuable today than maybe ever, because the culture is just so against it.
One of my favorite messages I ever got, kind of the way it began was, I know you don't have it all together. Correct. I don't. You get me. You see me. And I don't want to. And I'm pretty sure I don't put this off as somebody who has it all together. I just have this comes across too in your writing of I don't know a lot of things, but I think I might have an idea about this.
Yeah.
But even that I have some questions about.
I like to look like a fool. It's really fun, because I've fought it for so long. As you're growing up, and you don't want to look foolish, you don't want to look stupid, but there's power in being a fool. There's power in being ignorant and admitting and knowing that you're ignorant and saying, I know nothing. And I like to be in that position truly and honestly, because I learn things from other people, but also it frees me up to say what I'm thinking, and whether that resonates with anybody or not is probably negligible, in as much as at least I'm saying how I feel, knowing that how I feel could be completely wrong, or knowing that what I'm saying could be completely off base. But if it's not, and it does resonate with so and so, maybe we can learn something from each other through this.
Yeah, and if it doesn't make any sense to them, you can just be like, well, I'm from Florida. I want to close out the podcast, and I usually don't play games, but I want to try something out with you because you're a writer. I want to give you like play a game called Finish the Sentence, and if you want to guess how the game works, you can. But really, I'm going to start a sentence, and then I'm going to kind of let you finish it as you may. All right?
Okay.
Sound good? All right, the first one is, the perfect breakfast is?
From Waffle House.
That, when I pulled up your website for the first time, I think that blog for that day was like something about Waffle House. And I knew in that moment, I was like, oh, this guy and I got a lot in common. I I tried to start a tradition with my wife that we would go to Waffle House like right around Christmas. So like the day before Christmas or like the 23rd. We got married around Christmas. So I was like, oh, we should go there on Christmas. And she's from Indiana, so she was like, no, we're not doing that. Okay, so what do you get at Waffle House?
Well, we go there just about, it seems like 4 or 5 times a week, especially when we travel. We've been traveling a lot, and after every gig that I do, after the night is over, I'm exhausted. We always go to Waffle House because that's the only place open, really. Mm-hmm. That's also because I love it. So I always get the same thing lately, and it's changed, but lately for the last couple of years, I get 2 chicken melts with bacon. Ooh. And I get my hash browns in a ring with cheese, and then I get 1 over easy egg. And then I eat it all.
Oh yeah. Well, especially like after doing events and doing shows, and you do a lot of different like events where you're in front of people, but afterwards I have to you kind of have to come down from this high.
Oh yeah. You got to decompress.
And I'm really thankful. Like I get to, people book me for events, but a lot of those are in the Midwest where there's not a Waffle House. Like I'm just hoping, I'm hoping people from the South start booking me more. Because I'll just
book this guy.
Yeah, I hope you like poetry and weird jokes. But it's there's nothing better. Like Waffle House feels like home.
Oh yeah.
It's I think Waffle House just kind of brings people together too. It's a beautiful thing.
I like the culture that it's built around it. I like the way the company's run. I like the people I've met there. They work so hard. You can't not work hard at Waffle House and get away with it. So they're such a beautiful institution. The way they set it up, it doesn't fit in the modern culture right now. So I hope they're around forever, because God knows they go against the grain.
Yeah, and this podcast is sponsored by Waffle House. That's for sure. Okay, my next finish this sentence is, here is what I know about heaven.
I know that it's nothing like what you think it's going to be. I know that heaven is going to surprise a lot of people who think it's going to be one way and it ain't. That's what I think.
Yep, but I knew there's going to be a Waffle House there. I do know that.
Amen. Yeah. My personal belief on heaven is that there's going to be this moment where you wake up and you realize that you've been asleep for 70, 80 years or however long you were on earth. And you were asleep and now you're awake. And now this is different. This is different, but it's also the same, only better. I think it's going to be astounding. Some people have got visions and ideas of what it's going to be, and I just have this strong belief it's going to be shocking to a lot of people. They're going to go, "You got in?"
I think we're going to finally understand the old line of, everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And just I can rest in that, and I can get behind that. All right, my next one for you is, when I wake up tomorrow, I'll
do the same thing I did today. When I wake up tomorrow, probably the same thing. I'm real routine oriented. Routine is king to me. So I wake up, I write all day long, or whatever project I'm working on. I'll work on new material for the first upcoming show or something, and
yeah.
Currently, I'm working on books, but there's always other stuff going on. So that just you have to divide your day up, or nothing gets done. So.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I had to learn early on as a writer is you really aren't just working on one thing. You are working on about 10 different, I don't know how your computer is set up, but I have 30 tabs open. I'm writing about this, I'm working on this book, but I also want to work on this book, and I need to finish this for this and you're kind of all over the place. But that's how my mind works, so it's great.
So I've always got a fiction book going, and I've always got a nonfiction book going, and and then there's always a deadline, and then I've got a daily column deadline. And then we have a podcast that's been going for a long time. So that's always, I'm always making executive decisions on that. And then we've got a meeting later to talk about producing that, whatever. And then I've got my live shows that I do. So then I've got, you got to come up with new material for that. And so then my shows are all music stuff too. So I've got to have new music. So it's really, and then I like to keep I have to purge my brain every day at about 1:30. I go out for a long walk or run. I have to have this moment where I'm not looking at a screen, where I'm not engaged in active creativity or whatever, where I'm just, and then I come home and then I go back to work.
But that's the thing, is like, that's what it means to be dedicated. And
it's fun. It's fun. It's all fun for me right now. And I know that if you do it too much and the fun goes out of it, there's danger there. But right now, I feel so privileged to be able to do it at all. And it is. I'm having the most fun I've ever had. If I died tomorrow, I had a lot of fun, and I think I could say that I've done enough things that really have gratified me in a selfish way that I don't need to do anything else. I've enjoyed my life.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that you've done too, even though I've only been like aware of you for the last few months, but the work that you have done has made an impact as well. Like it hasn't just meant something to you; it's meant something to us.
I hope so. I don't have any kids, so this is my child. So writing like I'm doing is, I realize a lot of this comes out of that void of not having a child, and you have a lot left to give, and that you're designed to give, and because I can't bestow it on any children, this is where it goes. Yeah,
we don't have any children either, at least not yet. And I feel like with the work that I'm doing, like I have all, maybe you feel the same way, but I have all this love, all this hope, all this that I want to give. Like I need to put it somewhere, and I think I'm just like channeling all of that into the things that I share with the world, or like the events that I put on, or the poems that I write. Does that kind of resonate with you a little bit?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the things I'm attracted to writing about and doing, like, a few days ago, we went and we watched police officers buy toys for underprivileged children in Target. And then next week I'll go and I'll watch all these kids gather in this Methodist church. And these are kids with nothing, who live in the housing projects or worse, or kids whose parents have been arrested or killed or whatever. And I'll get to watch them get these presents that these cops, just because the cops didn't, they weren't there. It was an official program. They just decided to buy these gifts for them. They do this every year. They're going to give it to these kids. I derive so much pleasure from this and from writing about it, maybe more so than people with children would, because this is my life. Writing about little events like this, they mean so much more to me, I think, than they would mean to me if I were invested in my own family, because this is my family. These kids are my family. This is what I spend my life doing right now, and so.
When you do live shows and you do a bunch of, and I have one more, finish the sentence, but this isn't it. But when you do these live shows, does it just kind of feel like a family gathering?
That's what I want it to be. All I want it to be is fun. That's my only. Early on when we started doing the shows, I remember leaving a gig, and I remember thinking, "What is it that I am doing? What am I looking to gain out of this? What am I looking for other people to get out of this? What am I doing?" Because I tell a lot of jokes. It's a lot of comedy. It's a lot of storytelling. There's a lot of music, but I'm not really enriching anybody's lives. I'm not really like, So I came to this conclusion. I'll never forget. We were driving to Andalusia, Alabama, outside Andalusia in a forest, and I looked out the window and I thought, I feel really good today. And I think that's the key. I think the key is what I want to do is make other people feel good, even if it's only for a few minutes. for an hour at a show if I can. God help me if I can or not. I just want them to feel good. If they can feel good for a short minute of time, that's all I want.
Yeah, I get that too. It's the because people were like, and maybe they do this before. So like, I'm gonna go see a writer play music and tell stories. But,
Yeah.
Like, can I just stay at home? And it's like, and
exactly.
I feel like I have to work just as hard too, because I'm like, I'm a poet who's going to tell stories, and I'm also going to try to make some jokes as well. Will you please leave the couch for this? But the idea for those events is it's kind of like what you were saying, and in my thinking, it's like I want people to leave more hopeful than when they walked in, like that. Like like it helped them. I don't want to say escape the real world, because I don't think that's healthy, but in some ways, like to escape the things that they like, leave stuff at the front door, come in and just kind of rest for a little while.
I agree. There's a line from Chariots of Fire, the movie Chariots of Fire, and the runner is interviewed by the newspaper reporter. He's like, "Why do you do this?" And he said, "I run because when I run, I feel God's pleasure." And it's just a neat thing. I run, or I do this, because when I do it, I feel His pleasure. I feel maybe I can communicate some pleasure with other people.
Yeah.
That's it.
I like that. All right, finish the sentence. I don't know much, but I know for certain that
this is the best podcast in the world.
Let's go.
Let's see, a serious twist.
Well, that wasn't the serious answer. Oh, come on.
I would say I don't know much, but I know that I don't know much.
I accept that answer. That's a good one.
That's so true too.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. Well, that's really it. I really enjoyed hanging out and getting to know you. The last thing that I have on my notes for this is just to thank you. So once again, man, thank you so much for your work and for your writing. It has meant a lot to me. And I will say this about your book, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? I buy a lot of books with the intent like to read the whole thing. And most of the books I buy, I get about halfway through and I'm like, good, all right, I got it. And then like my mind will just drift off and I'll start something new. But I read your entire book, and I'm not I'm not trying to tell you this to make you feel better about yourself. I hope it does though. But like I read it and I was like, it was a really good book. So it was a good book for me. It just meant a lot to me. Like I felt like I was hanging out with a friend and with somebody who was like, oh, that just feels like one of my friends who's talking to me. So I really appreciate your work and I appreciate your time. And I'm hoping that we can get some Waffle House one day.
Oh man, absolutely. Let's do it. I think we should just say that we're going to do it.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Walk a Little Slower podcast. Thank you so much again for joining us on this episode. Make sure to check out the show notes to follow along with Sean's work. Trust me, you'll want to. There's also a couple of links to his books, especially the ones that were mentioned in this episode. As always, you can find me online at Written to Speak on Instagram or at writtentospeak.com. And if you would like to support this podcast and my ministry, go ahead and visit patreon.com/writtentospeak to become a patron. Your monthly donation allows me to spread hope and announce love through written and spoken word, just like this podcast. All right, that'll do it for us. Thank you again for joining us, and we will be back next week with another episode of the Walk a Little Slower podcast.